On this episode of Cinema Disaster, we're going to be talking about the 1985 zombie film, Return of the Living Dead. In my opinion, this is probably one of the best zombie films ever made, next to George Romero's Dawn of the Dead, of course. This has elements of comedy, horror, post-apocalyptic science fiction. It's super violent, and everyone dies. I mean, you can't beat that. There's a little bit of a confusion that some people have that this is the sequel to Night of the Living Dead, when actually this is its own series. Because what happened was George Romero and John Russo had made Night of the Living Dead together. And they had sort of a falling out or like a disagreement over which direction they wanted the series to go. I guess they went into like a court battle or something, and Romero retained the rights to the Dead films. So then you had movies like Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead, Land of the Dead, Diary of the Dead, and Survival of the Dead. John Russo retained the rights to the term Living Dead, and he ended up writing a book called Return of the Living Dead, which was eventually adapted into a script that he wrote, which was later revamped by Dan O'Bannon. It takes place at this medical supply warehouse, and there's a new hire named Freddy, and his boss Frank is telling him the story about how the movie Night of the Living Dead was based on a true story. Except for George Romero had changed the facts and changed the names around, but that the military had created this chemical called 2,4,5-trioxin, and it reanimated the dead. And through some sort of like clerical error, these barrels containing the trioxin and the remains of the bodies were actually sent to this medical warehouse that Freddy is now working at. So Frank takes him to the basement and shows him these containers of or these barrels that contain the zombies and the trioxin. And of course, obviously, Frank accidentally like cracks one open, and all of this like toxic gas spills out everywhere, and basically ignites a zombie apocalypse. This movie is filled with great gore scenes. It's a lot of fun. It's also a film that's considered a punk rock film, a punk rock movie, because there's a lot of punk characters in it, one played by Linnea Quigley. And this film actually is the one that cemented her as being a scream queen. She was also in Night of the Demons, Hollywood Chainsaw Hookers. She was in Silent Night, Deadly Night. She's been in tons and tons of stuff. This is also the first zombie film to incorporate the idea that zombies eat brains. Because that wasn't talked about in the Night of the Living Dead series. This is also the first zombie film where zombies can run and move a lot faster. Because in Night of the Living Dead, obviously, they moved a lot slower. This movie actually explains why zombies eat brains. It's because when they eat brains, it gets rid of the pain of being dead. Another interesting thing about the zombies in this film is, unlike the zombies in Night of the Living Dead or a lot of other zombie films that you see, All you have to do is just destroy the brain. You shoot them in the head, and that's it. Decapitate them, whatever, they're gone. And this one, that doesn't work. You can chop their head off, chop their arms off, dismember them in any way, and each part of the body moves independently of itself. So the only way to really destroy these zombies is to reduce them to ash, or just so there's nothing left to come after you. And they do this by throwing some of them into this crematorium, which turns out to be a terrible idea, because when the smoke goes up into the atmosphere, it just rains down onto the city, and it reanimates not only recently dead corpses, but that have been dead for a long time. So this creates this whole zombie apocalypse scenario where the whole town is completely overran by zombies. Tobe Hooper, the guy that directed Texas Chainsaw Massacre, The Funhouse, and Life Force, was originally slated, or at least offered, to direct this film. And when he turned it down, it went to Dan O'Bannon, who was the writer for Alien, Life Force, and Total Recall. Dan O'Bannon is also the person that revamped the script and really sort of souped it up from the script that John Russo had. The soundtrack to this is incredible. It includes a lot of punk rock and death rock bands. You've got the Cramps, 45 Grave, TSOL, The Damned, the Street Dogs, who used to be known as the FUs, which was a 80s Boston hardcore punk band. And then you got Rocky Erickson, who used to front the 60s psychedelic band, the 13th Floor Elevators. Scream Factory did a 30th anniversary collector's edition Blu-ray of this back in 2016. And then in 2011, there was a documentary that got released called More Brains about this film. This movie also spawned 4 sequels. There was Return of the Living Dead 2, Return of the Living Dead 3, which was actually directed by Brian Yuzna, who you might know as the producer from Reanimator, From Beyond. He was also the director of Society, Bride of Reanimator, Beyond Reanimator. There was a book released called The Complete History of Return of the Living Dead. So if you want to see a film that doesn't take itself too seriously, if you're a fan of punk rock, if you're a fan of zombie films, and if you want to see a movie that is really graphic and gory and fun and violent, and a movie where everyone dies, this is the movie for you. So check out Return of the Living Dead, and until next time, keep watching.